I'm starting to think that ads are ruining podcasts, but I also want people I like to make money, so... At this point, the advertising format on podcasts is pretty formulaic. Either at the beginning or the middle of an episode, podcasters take a moment to read an advertisement from a sponsor endorsing the product or the service to the audience. Joe Rogan might have been the first, I remember, doing this style of advertisements. Up until the Spotify deal, he did all of his ad reads up top so he doesn't interrupt the flow of the podcast. Unlike some people, I actually think that's the best way to do it, especially for podcasts that dive into more serious subjects. But most of the podcasts I listen to do them at the beginning, middle, and end of a podcast. Unless you're king in the sting and then you do them every 10 minutes so that a literal third of your podcast is actually ad reads. Anyway, I know it sounds like I'm complaining too much here, but I'm actually thankful for ads in podcasting overall. If some of these early podcasters never figured out how to make money off of it, then we would probably have a lot less, or at least a lot less interesting people doing podcasts. But I think ads have gone a little too far sometimes, and I'm not exactly sure where the line is there, or whether or not it's been crossed. So I hope you'll indulge me while I think out loud here about what exactly troubles me about advertisements and podcasting. I guess the easiest place to start is just annoyance. Some podcasts just have too many fucking ads. Sometimes it feels like the podcast is just there to support the advertisements instead of the ads supporting the podcast, which is how it's supposed to be. This is more common in high production podcasts like King and the Sting, which I guess you could say they have more people and so they need more advertisements so that they can pay them because the production's bigger. But honestly, has anyone ever actually loved a podcast just because it had a big budget? I mean, the Joe Rogan Experience is just Joe talking to his guests and he has one producer, Jamie, on the sidelines, and Mark Maron just records his pod by himself in a garage. I'm not saying they don't have more people working for them as far as editing, booking, things like that, but as far as the actual podcast, they're not flashy at all. It's just a couple of people talking in a room, and people love them. As I mentioned before, Rogan reads all of his ads at the beginning of the show, so once you've listened to them, you can sit back and listen to the rest of the pod without any interruptions. Then Spotify happened. The thing is, on Spotify, Rogan not only has his ads that he reads at the beginning, just like before, but now sprinkled in are all these annoying Spotify ads. Rogan's podcast gets pretty intense sometimes. I mean, you have some pretty serious guests on there, and they can get into pretty serious subjects. And sometimes you have a guest, who's having some emotional moment where they're talking about some life-changing thing that happened to him, and then all of a sudden...
Now is the time to celebrate. The first NFL Sunday of the season is about to kick off.
Which kind of leads into my next point, which is interrupting a podcast for an advertisement. A lot of pods, for example, Tiger Belly, will just do the ad reads before and then edit them in later. This is actually not a bad way to do it because you can just choose good stopping points and avoid totally killing momentum of a good conversation. On the other end of the spectrum, you have podcasts that happen in real time, which means the podcaster has to awkwardly stop the podcast to read the ads and then segue back in when they're done. Speaking of being on the spectrum, Ben Shapiro is the absolute worst offender of this. I don't really watch the Ben Shapiro show that often, but I have watched the Sunday special series he does, which generally has pretty good guests and interesting conversations. But my God, is it cringy when it comes to the ad reads. Ben will, no joke, just stop in the middle of a conversation, turn to a camera, and read an ad out while the guest is still sitting there. It's one of the weirdest things I've seen when it comes to advertising. I guess I just don't get why you couldn't pre-tape those and put them in later so that you don't have your guest just fucking awkwardly sitting there while you're reading some phony baloney ad about how much you love Brooklyn and Sheets.
How do you do your job in a politically correct universe? But first, I want to say thanks to our sponsors over at Lending Club. So sometimes people need a helping hand, whether it's unexpected repairs or medical expenses.
Speaking of phony baloney, one of the things that rubs me the wrong way in podcasting is when people lie during their ad reads. There's a little bit of exaggeration in all ads. And I get it, you're trying to endorse the product, and if the audience believes that you actually use it, it's gonna sell better. I mean, look, we're Americans, okay? We get that Shaq isn't actually using all of the products in the massive amount of endorsements he does. I mean, holy shit. And we're kind of okay with it. You're using a big name to get eyes on the screen, it works. But it does get a little weird, particularly with podcasting, because I don't know Shaq's personal life, so I'm probably not going to be able to verify whether he's using a power balance bracelet in his free time. But with a lot of podcasters, you know their whole lives. Like, you know the ins and outs of everything they're doing. There are a lot of times where I'll listen to a podcast where they say how much they love a product and it's the only brand they use, and then in the same podcast mention using a different product. My all-time favorite podcast is called Tuesdays with Stories. It's just comedians Mark Norman and Joe List riffing for an hour, and I love it. But they are one of the most egregious offenders of what I'm talking about. One of their more common sponsors is Raycon earbuds, and they promote them very frequently. They also mention using AirPods very frequently. In one of the recent episodes, they read a Raycon ad, and then not even 10 minutes later, they both talk about how they only use AirPods.
I can't find my AirPods right now. Bobby Kelly was my roommate. I think he took them. And I'm already sitting here talking to you currently, and my mind is half on AirPods. I'm like, what am I going to do? Walk around and not listen to music?
Exactly. Then you put your old headphones in. You're like, well, this is weird, but these headphones don't match the phone, and they got us by the cojones. Love it. I listen to music before a show. I listen to music on the way to the show. I need these pods. I need these earbuds. They help. So Raycon wireless earbuds are half the price.
This is where it gets kind of weird, right? Like, I don't really care that much. I understand they're just reading ads and I want them to make money, but is it okay to just blatantly lie to an audience, even if it's in such an inconsequential and superficial way? I guess I just don't understand why you can't endorse the product and talk about all of its cool features and advertise it without actually saying you use it when you don't. Like I said, it's not really that big of a deal, and I don't think it speaks negatively to anyone's character per se. But in this category of ads, there is one specific example that I do think is questionable when it comes to saying you use the service. BetterHelp is basically an online therapy service where you have access to a therapist that you can text or like video call, etc. I don't know that I have any qualms with the service per se. I'd have to like look into it. I don't know if it is effective or not or whatever. That's neither here nor there. I've seen podcasters doing ad reads for BetterHelp where they pretend that they use the service. It's one thing if you're talking about mattresses and earbuds, but to pretend like you've used BetterHelp instead of your actual real life therapist is bizarre, and it's just like a weird area to be shifty on. I mean, this service is promoted to try and help people who may be depressed or suicidal, and it just seems like a pretty serious topic for casual white lies. I'm only bringing it up because one time I saw a particularly sketchy ad read for BetterHelp. Basically, one of the hosts of a podcast I listened to said that they had like a mental breakdown on the highway and they had to pull off on the side of the road, and that they used the BetterHelp app to get help right away. And look, maybe it actually happened, but these are rich podcasters. Like, I'm pretty sure you actually have a real therapist you could call, or someone, you know, there's something fishy about saying that you use this service in a really emergency situation. It's one thing if you're saying like, oh, this mattress is so fluffy, I love it, it's so comfortable. And it's another thing to be like, if you're gonna commit suicide, you should use BetterHelp. It's like, it's just kind of a weird way to make money. I'm not necessarily asserting that anyone in this video has done anything wrong. And like I said, I'm actually a fan of all of these people. I like listening to their podcasts. It's just, it gets a little fishy at times. And, you know, I wonder what you guys think about it. Like, am I being overly critical here about ads? Or do you think there's like a small gray area issue being overlooked in the podcasting world? Let me know what you guys think. And I do want to make one more point. And this could be the most serious. And, you know, I try not to get too personal on these, but I just have to say, when it comes to podcasting, nothing is more important than
DraftKings, the official daily fantasy partner of the NFL, is putting you in the center of this weekend's action. New customers can get a free shot at a $1 million top prize with their first deposit by signing up using code ROGAN. Get in on the